"This formula is wrong." Marcus Blackwell adjusted his platinum cufflinks for the third time in 10 minutes, his hands betraying the nervousness he refused to acknowledge. At 42, he had built an empire worth $12 billion, yet here he sat in a modest diner on the outskirts of Chicago, waiting to finalize the deal that would cement his legacy forever. The acquisition of Chen Industries' revolutionary clean energy formula would make him the most powerful man in renewable energy, but more importantly, it would prove to his late father that the boy he'd called worthless had become unstoppable. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his tailored suit that cost more than most people made in a year. He checked his Patek Philippe watch. Dr. Chen was 15 minutes late. Marcus hated waiting, especially in places that reminded him of his childhood, when his single mother worked double shifts at diners just like this one to keep food on their table. If this story moves you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to comment below what you think about Marcus's journey. Subscribe to Billionaire in Love for more inspiring stories that will touch your heart. The bell above the door chimed and Dr. James Chen entered, looking every bit the brilliant scientist who had spent 20 years perfecting his groundbreaking formula. Behind him walked a young woman Marcus hadn't expected, Chen's daughter Amy. She was perhaps 25, with tired eyes that seemed far older than her years, and hands stained with what looked like coffee and ink. Her simple uniform suggested she worked here, in this very diner where her father had chosen to meet. "Mr. Blackwell," Dr. Chen extended his hand with a weary smile. "Thank you for agreeing to meet here. Amy insisted we use her workplace, said it was neutral ground." He glanced at his daughter with obvious pride mixed with concern. "Amy, this is Marcus Blackwell." Amy Chen nodded politely but said nothing, moving efficiently between tables as she served other customers. Marcus watched her work, noticing how she remembered every order without writing anything down, how she smiled genuinely at each customer despite her exhaustion. There was something about her that reminded him of his own mother, that quiet strength that comes from carrying burdens too heavy for one person. Dr. Chen spread the documents across the scratched formica table. "The formula you're purchasing will revolutionize solar energy efficiency. We can achieve 94% conversion rates with materials that cost 60% less than current technology. This could change everything, Mr. Blackwell. Clean energy could finally compete with fossil fuels on price alone." Marcus scanned the papers with practiced efficiency. The math was elegant, the potential staggering. This formula would generate trillions in revenue while actually helping save the planet. It was perfect, too perfect, perhaps, but his team of experts had verified everything multiple times. "The price we discuss, $800 million, remains acceptable?" Marcus asked, pulling out his fountain pen. The weight of the gold felt familiar in his fingers, a reminder of how far he'd climbed from that scared boy, watching his mother count coins for grocery money. "About that," Dr. Chen hesitated, glancing toward his daughter who was refilling coffee at a nearby table. "I need to explain why I'm selling." Marcus tensed. Last-minute complications were the bane of every deal, and he'd walked away from acquisitions worth more than this one over far less. "I thought we had an understanding, Doctor." "We do. It's just, Doctor." Chen's voice cracked slightly. "Amy's been working 3 jobs to pay for my cancer treatments. The experimental therapy isn't covered by insurance, and we've exhausted our savings, mortgaged the house, everything. This formula represents 20 years of my life's work. But watching my daughter sacrifice her dreams to keep me alive." He paused, unable to continue. Marcus felt an uncomfortable tightness in his chest. He'd spent so many years building walls around his emotions that moments like these caught him off guard. "I see. Well, the business side remains unchanged. Your motivations don't affect the value of the intellectual property." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus found himself watching Amy more closely. She moved with purpose despite her obvious exhaustion, treating every customer with dignity regardless of how they treated her. When an elderly man spilled coffee on himself, she was there immediately with napkins and a gentle joke that made him laugh instead of feel embarrassed. When a young mother struggled to keep her toddler entertained, Amy somehow produced crayons and paper from her apron pocket. Dr. Chen began explaining the technical specifications, but Marcus found his attention divided. Amy was approaching their table now, coffee pot in hand. "More coffee, gentlemen?" she asked, her voice professionally pleasant but tired. "Please?" Dr. Chen smiled at his daughter. "Amy, I've told Mr. Blackwell how proud I am of you. Biochemistry degree from Northwestern, acceptance to 3 medical schools, and you're working here to help with my treatments instead of pursuing your dreams." Amy's cheeks flushed. "Dad, please, I'm sure Mr. Blackwell isn't interested in." Actually, Marcus found himself saying, "That's quite impressive. Why biochemistry?" For the first time, Amy's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine passion. "I want to work on targeted cancer therapies. My father's case got me interested in how we might use the body's own mechanisms to fight disease more effectively." She poured their coffee with steady hands. "But that's a long way off now." Something in her tone, resigned acceptance mixed with carefully buried dreams, hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd heard that same tone from his mother when she'd given up her night school classes to work more hours. "What do you mean?" Amy glanced at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "Medical school requires full-time commitment, and with Dad's treatments, someone needs to work. The medical bills." She shrugged, a gesture that tried to convey acceptance but couldn't hide the pain. "Dreams can wait, family can't." Marcus signed the preliminary papers mechanically, his mind elsewhere. The formula would make him richer than he'd ever imagined, but watching this young woman sacrifice her future for her father's life stirred memories he'd spent decades burying. His own mother had made similar sacrifices, giving up her teaching degree to support them both after his father left. She died still talking about someday returning to school, someday pursuing her dreams. "There's just the technical verification remaining," Dr. Chen was saying. "Amy's actually been helping me refine the calculations. She has quite an intuitive grasp of the chemistry involved." Amy returned to clear their plates, and Marcus noticed her pause as she glanced at the formula spread across the table. Her eyes moved quickly across the equations, and he saw her brow furrow slightly. "Is something wrong?" Marcus asked. Amy hesitated, clearly debating whether to speak. "I'm sorry, I couldn't help but notice." "Dad, did you account for the thermal coefficient degradation in the silicon substrate when you calculated the efficiency rates?" Dr. Chen looked puzzled. "Of course, sweetheart. The formula compensates for standard degradation patterns. But this assumes standard conditions," Amy said carefully, pointing to a specific line in the equation. "Under real-world temperature variations, especially in desert installations where these panels would be most effective, the efficiency would drop significantly. The formula predicts 94% efficiency, but accounting for thermal cycling, you'd probably see closer to 71% in practical applications." The diner suddenly felt very quiet. Marcus stared at the young woman who had just potentially saved him from the biggest mistake of his career, or cost him the deal of a lifetime. Dr. Chen was studying the papers intently, his face growing pale. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Amy, you're right. How did I miss this? 20 years of work, and I overlooked something so fundamental." Marcus felt his world tilting. "What exactly are you saying?" Amy looked mortified. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. I'm sure there's something I'm not understanding." "No," Dr. Chen interrupted, his voice hollow. "You're absolutely right. The formula works perfectly in controlled laboratory conditions, but real-world applications would face significant efficiency losses. Mr. Blackwell, I can't let you pay $800 million for something that won't perform as promised." The ethical thing to do was clear, and Marcus knew it. A 71% efficiency rate was still revolutionary, still worth perhaps $300 million, but nowhere near the transformative technology he'd thought he was buying. He could pressure Dr. Chen to honor the original deal. The man was desperate enough that he might agree. But looking at Amy, seeing the guilt and fear in her eyes as she realized she might have just cost her father the money that could save his life. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like the man his mother had raised him to be, not the ruthless businessman he'd become. "Dr. Chen," Marcus said slowly, "your daughter just demonstrated more integrity and scientific rigor in 5 minutes than most of my research team shows in a year." Amy was wringing her hands. "Mr. Blackwell, please don't let this affect the deal. Maybe there's a way to compensate for the thermal issues. Maybe there is a way," Marcus interrupted, pulling out his phone. "Dr. Chen, would you be willing to head up a research division dedicated to perfecting this technology? The salary would be substantial, with full medical benefits, and we'd provide funding for additional research." Dr. Chen blinked in confusion. "Aye, but the formula isn't worth what we agreed." "No, but the scientist who developed it is, and the daughter who caught a critical flaw that could have cost both of us dearly definitely is." Marcus turned to Amy. "Miss Chen, I understand you've been accepted to medical school." Amy nodded mutely. "Would you consider a gap year working as a research consultant while we perfect your father's formula? Full salary, benefits, and when you're ready for medical school, Blackwell Industries will cover your tuition and living expenses. In return, after you complete your medical degree, you'll spend 2 years heading up our biomedical research division." The coffee pot slipped from Amy's hands, shattering on the floor. Neither man moved to help clean it up as tears began streaming down her face. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Marcus surprised himself with the honesty of his answer. "Because 25 years ago, a waitress named Maria Blackwell worked 3 jobs to support her son. She never got the chance to pursue her dreams because she spent all her time making sure he could pursue his. That waitress's son became very successful, but he forgot along the way that success without humanity is just expensive emptiness." Dr. Chen was openly crying now. "Mr. Blackwell, you don't know what this means to us." "Actually, I do." Marcus stood up, leaving the shattered papers on the table. "I know what it means to watch someone you love sacrifice everything for you. I know what it means to carry the weight of deferred dreams, and I know what it means to have someone believe in your potential when you can barely see it yourself." Amy was still staring at him in disbelief. "But the deal." "The deal was for a flawed formula. What I'm offering now is something much more valuable. A partnership built on truth, integrity, and the recognition that the most revolutionary discoveries come from people brave enough to speak up when something isn't right, even when it costs them everything." Marcus pulled out his business card and handed it to Amy. "Think about it. Discuss it with your father." "But Amy..." He paused, remembering his mother's tired smile as she tucked him into bed before leaving for her night shift. "Never apologize for telling the truth. The world has enough people willing to stay quiet for money. We need more people willing to speak up for what's right." As Marcus walked toward the door, he heard Amy call out, "Mr. Blackwell." He turned back. "Thank you," she said simply, "not just for the opportunity but for listening, for seeing us as people, not just a transaction." Marcus nodded, unable to trust his voice. Outside, his driver was waiting with the Bentley, but for the first time in years, Marcus decided to walk. The Chicago air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and he found himself thinking about his mother. She'd died believing her son would change the world, but she'd never lived to see him actually do it. Maybe it wasn't too late to honor her faith in the man she'd raised him to be. 6 months later, Dr. Chen's improved formula achieved 89% real-world efficiency rates. Amy had enrolled in medical school with full funding from Blackwell Industries, but she continued working part-time on the research team. The Chen family had moved into a beautiful home near Northwestern University, and Dr. Chen's cancer was in full remission. But the real transformation had happened in Marcus himself. The deal that was supposed to make him the most powerful man in renewable energy had instead made him something far more valuable. A person his mother would have been proud to call her son. As he stood in his office, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Marcus kept Amy's words on his desk as a reminder. This formula is wrong. Sometimes the most important truths come from the most unexpected sources, spoken by people with everything to lose and the courage to lose it for the sake of what's right. The renewable energy revolution that followed changed the world, but it started in a modest diner with a tired waitress's daughter who chose truth over security, and a billionaire who remembered that real success isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you lift up along the way. This story reminds us that true wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in the positive impact we make on others' lives. If this touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe to Trillionaire in Love. Comment below and tell us about a time someone's honesty changed your life. Your story might inspire our next video. Together, we can spread more love and hope in this world, one story at a time.